lunch. This is Juriba, so John and Neil from Juriba. They're going to have a fireside chat, whatever you want to call it, for 15 minutes around what Juriba does. Up to you.
Thank you. All right, hi guys. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you all making it from the lunchtime down to the first session after lunch. So I'm Neil, and this is my colleague John. Thank you for coming along to the session today. So before we get started, I just wanted to give you guys a kind of brief history of Juriba, where we've been, for those of you who haven't come across us before. So we started back 16, 17 years ago with the mission to help large enterprise organizations deliver predictable change in end user computing at scale and more efficiently than they were doing. And there were some common challenges that we came across back then. Some of them are still true today. Lots of siloed tooling, siloed teams. One team who owned back then SCCM, a team that owned some parts of Active Directory. So bringing all of the data that customers needed to understand where they were and where they wanted to get to was a challenge in itself. And we also saw lots of manual processes going on, lots of customers trying to manage these big changes using Excel spreadsheets, and also making lots of manual kind of updates to different systems. So those were some of the challenges, and all leading to unpredictable delivery and frustration all the way from top to bottom, from the business units themselves and right down to the end users. So to tackle that, we built a product called Juriba DPC that was intended to bring all of that data together that the customers needed to plan into a single platform, and then we wrapped it around with a kind of a process and project management framework that would allow customers to get out of those Excel spreadsheets and start tracking what they're doing properly in some tooling. So yeah, that's where we come from. And with that in mind, in this session, what we wanted to do was kind of share some of the lessons learnt from along the way, and then think about how those lessons might apply to how that change has changed over the years. So to start us off, John, maybe you could take us through some of the sorts of things that we have found have had the biggest impact in those types of projects. So I keep checking behind that we're on the right side. Go on.
It's the problem with the two screens, isn't it? So I've been doing this for quite some time and helping customers actually use the software and use it for changes, processes, program changes, projects for delivery. It's always amazes me how much people do with it, what different use cases they come up with. It's always quite interesting what they do with our system once they've got all of that data, because as Neil was saying, you have this siloed data, you perhaps have it in SCCM, you have it in Intune, you have it in ServiceNow. What we do is bring that data together and then you can do something with it. So it's not just static data, it's actually running a process through, managing something with that process, and then getting a deployment at the end of it. So the types of things that I've seen coming in the last few years is lots of things about regulatory requirements or geographic restrictions. So if you're talking about, say, which region do you put your VDIs in, that can be really important. If you're a multinational company, where are they residing? You want these devices to be migrated as part of your overall program of works, but you've got a difference there. You've got a different path for this, and maybe the communication's different. Maybe the language is different for each one of those as well. And maybe you've got regulatory requirements that specify exactly what you're allowed to do with that device. So we had one customer where they're based in Mexico, and in their bank branches, their teller machines had to be dealt with completely differently to the office machines, which were in the same location. So how do you manage that? It's making sure that whatever tool you use, and that's where DPC can come in, is flexible enough that you can do all of these different things as part of your program of works. So you're able to adjust it slightly depending on what the delivery method has to be for that particular device or that particular user or that particular region. And then if I talk about end user engagement, this is very easy to forget. If you're doing an IT rollout, if you're changing people to Windows 11, you might think, oh, we're just going to do it. We're just going to get it out there. If you're replacing devices, we're just going to do it. We're going to get it out to them. But that could lead you to actually slowing down that process. Because what if the user's not there? What if the user's away on holiday or something's happening with that particular department? Maybe you're trying to upgrade the devices and it's in your accounting department and they're doing their shutdown for the end of the year. How do you manage those types of process? So with our tool and with the DPC type of tool, you can do end user engagement. You could start to ask them what's necessary, what's required. And I've seen the extremes of this. I've seen the ones where we're just pushing it out, that's it, we're not telling them anything. Or at the very other extreme, you've got where you're telling them every single aspect of it and they need to be fully involved and they need to tell you when they want things scheduled. They need to give you all of the details about what they're doing. Both of those have their problems. The first one is you could be trying to push something out where they're not ready. And the other one is you could be trying to push something out and your users aren't responding, which is a fairly common thing I've heard. So you're not being able to push things forward. You're not being able to move forward and it slows down your process. What I've seen is a happy medium of that. So you start with the premise, okay, we are going to do this process, it has to happen. So we're going to pick when these things are going to happen to these devices or these users. We're going to come up with a date. This is the scheduled date because we've fitted our engineers into this particular scope or we've fitted our cloud deployment into it. And we're going to tell the users, this is the date we've got. Just tell us if there's a problem with that date. And then they can respond back to you. They feel that they're empowered, they feel part of the process, and you get a much better throughput of it. Now you can, of course, with a DPC, add in things like regular communications to them. So if they're not responding to your first email that you send out, you can send them a repeat email, you can send them a reminder. And if you did want to go to that point where you are bringing them into the process and they have to respond, you could escalate to their manager, for example. You can start to do all of these things with DPC, and that's because you've gathered all of this data together. So you've got data about the device, data about the user, data about your HR system. Who's their manager? Who do you need to communicate with? That's the power of a DPC because you've got all of that there. And then that leads on to the automation side of things. What are you going to do with all that data? You can do lots and lots of things with it. I was saying to Neil this morning, it's one thing that popped into my mind when I was trying to come down in the hotel lift. And the hotel lift was full, and we were coming down 9 floors, and it stopped at every single floor. But every time the doors would open, nobody else could get in, the doors would shut, and we'd go down. Now, if you think about device life cycles, warranty dates is an obvious one. You might say, okay, if the device is within 60 days of the warranty date, it's going to come into our replacement process. That's something we want to do something with. But that's equivalent to my lift, where all of these people are packed in it, and you can't put any more into it. What if you had an extra criteria requirement there? What if on that lift knows how many people are in it, or it's got a weight limit and it knows a weight? What if you could take that criteria into your decision-making process? So the lift could say, okay, I've been asked to go at this floor, however, I'm already full. I'm not going to stop there because there's no purpose doing it. Perhaps if you're doing your devices under warranty replacement, you want to sweat those devices. You want to make them last a bit longer before you do anything with them. So perhaps you've got a DEX tool. And you're bringing in the responses for that. You're bringing in the device score. And the device score says it's a frustrating device and it's within my warranty period. So then you only start to migrate those devices that actually meet both of those criteria. So you're saving money, but you're actually making sure that you're deploying the right devices at the right time. You're not just replacing a device because it meets that one criteria point, where it could be a perfectly good device. And we all know how resistant users can be to change. If you don't need to change it, why do it? So start to bring that data in. And that's where other things come into process as well. More data you bring into a DPC, the more criteria points you can do. And it could be applications. You could be looking at applications. Are we at the right level for this application? Can it be put onto this Windows 11 device? Has it been tested for this Windows 11 device? Are we ready to deploy it? So taking advantage of all of those sets of data, bringing them all together and being able to make the decisions on those, but getting a much better throughput, much better response, much better return on what you're putting in.
Yeah, so we've seen, thanks John, so we've seen, making sure it's moved on, a trend away, obviously, from those big bang migrations that we started helping with customers with all those years ago. So hopefully the days of those horrible Windows 7 to Windows 10 style migrations are in the past. But we've also seen that enterprise customers are looking to shift away from taking on big projects like that and looking after things more from an evergreen point of view, keeping everything up to date all of the time. One of the challenges with that, though, of course, is that your end users are demanding some of the flexibility that John was alluding to there. They want to be in control of when change happens to them and how it happens. But the IT teams obviously need to maintain the control so they can ensure that things are being kept up to date, secure, compliant. So there's always a balance to be found there between giving the users enough control, but retaining enough control over the process as an IT team. So looking ahead to the future, we've been surveying our customers, and some of you guys this morning who have come by the booth or taken our survey, in the run-up to this event, just to kind of get a feel for how mature people's processes around change have become. So far, with all the responses we've had, we're finding that we're kind of seeing people about the mid-level of where we've got. So we had a range from 0 to 30 of maturity levels, and the average is coming out at about 18 at the moment. So there's obviously lots of improvements happening. The processes around change are getting better, but that tells us there's lots of opportunity to improve with more automation. We're also hearing from customers that they're wanting to do, obviously they're under pressure to do more with less. It goes a little bit to one of the things we're talking to the customers about at the moment. It's one of the things that John alluded to is how do you do something like a device lifecycle, which has traditionally been take the oldest device and replace it, and do something a bit more intelligent. So maybe incorporate performance data, incorporate user sentiment data, and only replace devices that are, that are old and also not performing badly, and retain devices for longer if they're aging but performing okay. And there's some common themes, which side are they, that have been coming up with, or some common kind of challenges that people have been tackling for years that are going to keep coming up in the coming years, and some new ones that we've been hearing about from our customers.
I think it's important to note here, we've got some quite large different use cases on there, but maybe you can imagine with the amount of data set that you'll be able to combine in a DPC with the automation facilities, with the deployment facilities, you can start to think of smaller changes as well, or just smaller processes that you want to monitor. So another thing that a DPC could do for you is it could be monitoring what devices you've got out there and communicating with the users to confirm different aspects with you. So I've done a process where the locations for the users as they arrive at your company are filled into Active Directory. And they're there, but they're sort of static. And so if that user starts to move around the organization, how are you going to make sure that's up to date? If you do need to change their device in the future, what do you do at that point? Where do they need to go to? What engineers are you sending out to them? What location are you going to tell them to go to? Whereas if something like a DPC, you could start to gather more information from them. So you could say to them, this is the location we think you're in, can you confirm it? And you could do that every 6 months or something like that. As the responses come back in, you can feed that back into your Active Directory or Intro, wherever you've got that data stored. So you can constantly keep up to date on the device information from the user perspective as well. So not just taking in the technical side, but involving the user in what you're doing, but making sure that the data you have about them is correct and accurate, so that when you get to a process, you can do something with it. And it could be very small processes. We've done these up to, say, 400, 500,000 devices. But you could, within that, you might have a subset of devices that have a process that only affects 300 devices. Maybe you want to keep a track of your contractors or do something different with those. And you can start to build separate processes for those as well.
All right, I think we are pretty much out of time. So thanks, everyone, for coming along. We'd love to hear from you guys if you want to come and talk to us about managing end-user compute change at scale. Come see us upstairs. And the Canopy code is there if you guys want to scan it.
And
for,
we have
your
giraffes
points.
available as
well.
well.
Yes, of course. If you want to come take our survey, you can get yourself a lovely Juriba giraffe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel.
Actually, I did the survey, so I've been awarded a giraffe, so they do work. So.